And we're back. I got my All This Math t-shirt on. In case you're wondering, merch is coming soon. The merch will be coming soon. I'm gonna keep you posted. All right, you will know when the t-shirts will be available, when the sweatshirts, when the hoodies, the baseball tees, all that. The dad hats, the trucker hats, all of that. All This Math is a movement. So if you want merch, it is coming soon. All right, today's problem, we're dealing with positive and negative fractions. Positive and negative fractions. If you see behind me, you see the problem we have right here. We have negative 5/8 plus 1/4. Negative 5/8 plus 1/4. So what does negative 5/8 mean? Let's just keep it real basic, right? Because a lot of times when people talk about fractions, they talk about adding fractions, subtracting fractions, multiplying and dividing them. We take for granted that people even know what a fraction really is, right? A lot of people don't even know what a fraction really is and what it really means conceptually and what it represents. Negative 5/8, right? That's a negative. But let's treat it like it's positive for the time being, right? Just so we understand what the fraction really represents. Let's imagine that was a positive 5/8. What that means is, let's say you take an object, right? Any type of object. You know, it could be a cake, it could be a pizza, it could be some type of food, an amount of food, it could be a group of people. And let's say you broke that object up into 8 equal pieces. 8 equal pieces. That's what the denominator tells us. How many equal pieces an object is cut up into, right? So because our denominator, which is the bottom number, right, is an 8, that means that there are 8 equal pieces. The numerator, which is the top number, tells us that there are 5 of those pieces that we're focused on, or 5 of those pieces that we care about, or 5 of those pieces that we have, right? Or 5 of those pieces that we're going to give away, whatever it may be. The denominator tells you how many pieces the whole object is cut up into, how many equal pieces, right? The numerator tells you how many of those pieces we are focused on. So in an object where we have 8 equal pieces, we're focused on 5 of them. 8 equal pieces, we focused on 5 of them, all right? So if you had a pack of cookies, there was 8 cookies in there, and let's say you ate 5 of them. You ate 5/8 of the package because it was 8 cookies. Every cookie is the same size. That's 8 equal pieces, right, of cookies, and you ate 5 of them. So that's 5/8. Over here, 1/4 or 1/4. Now we got 4 equal pieces. 4 equal pieces, and we focused on 1 of them. So that's 1/4, right? But if I want to add negative 5/8 plus 1/4, that's kind of like apples and oranges because we can't really add. I mean, we can, but we got to do some computation, right? We can't really add eighths and quarters, right? You want to always add the same type of denomination, right? So that way we're going from apples to apples or oranges to oranges. Eighths is like apples, quarters is like oranges. So that's when we deal with something called the LCD, which stands for least common denominator. LCD, least common denominator. Now what's an LCD? Maybe you heard of an LCM. LCM stands for least common multiple. A LCD is just an LCM between denominators. It's an LCM in a fraction. So if you know what an LCM is, least common multiple, then you can figure out what the LCD is. And all that is basically what's the smallest number that both of these numbers can multiply into. What is the smallest number that both of these numbers can multiply into? Now let me tell you this too. Sometimes what people do is they don't find the LCD, they just find what we call the CD. The CD is just a common denominator. And the way you find a common denominator is just by looking at the denominators and multiplying them by each other. So just doing 8 times 4. And if you know your multiplication facts, which you really need to know in order to be able to add or subtract fractions, you gotta know your multiplication facts. There's no way around it. I highly recommend it. Study your multiplication facts, know from 1 times 1 up to 12 times 12 at a minimum. You can even go up to the 13s and 14s and 15s and keep going, right? But know your multiplication facts. So you'll know 8 times 4 off the top is 32, real easy, right? You gotta have that memorized. And if you're looking at this video as a parent and you're trying to get your children ready, get them ready as early as possible. as young as possible, as early as possible. It's never too young, it's never too early for them to memorize their multiplication facts. It'll make life a lot easier in the future, whether it's in a math class or whether it's just in everyday life, because we all got to do computation. So 8 times 4 is 32. That's a common denominator because 8 can multiply into 32 because we just did it. We did 8 times 4, we got 32. And 4 can multiply into 32 because we just did it. We did 4 times 8 basically, because 8 times 4 and 4 times 8 is the same thing, right? That's the common denominator, right? But that's bigger than what you need. We want to deal with the smallest number possible because the smaller the number is, typically the easier the math is going to be, right? So instead of doing 8 times 4 and just getting 32, which I could have did, I want the least common denominator, meaning I want the smallest number that they both multiply into. And if you don't know it off the top, what I suggest you do is just list a set of multiples. Just list multiples for each number. So it'll look like this, right? Let's say 8, right? So we got 8. And this is what you do until you get more familiar with the multiples of just random numbers. You start with 8 times 1. 8 times 1 is 8. Then you do 8 times 2. That's 16. Then you do 8 times 3. 24. 8 times 4. 32. 8 times 5 is 40. So what I like to do is if I'm compiling a list of multiples, I do the first 5, right? And then I'm gonna compare. I'm gonna do a comparison of the first 5 multiples to find the LCD in the list. Then I'm gonna deal with 4. So I got the first 5 multiples of 8, 16, 24, 32, and 40, all right? Then I go to 4. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4, 16. 4 times 5 is 20. So now, I got a list of the first 5 multiples of 8, and I got a list of the first 5 multiples of 4. Now, if I'm looking for the lowest common multiple, which will be my lowest common denominator, I just go to both of these lists. I look for the smallest number that is in both lists. The smallest number that's in both lists. So it's a few numbers that's in both lists, like 16 is in this list and 16 is in that list. But also, 8 is in this list and 8 is also in that list. So the question for you is, which number is smaller, 8 or 16? 8 is the smaller number. So 8 is your LCD. 8 is your LCD. 8 is the LCD. Now, I'm gonna show you how to use the LCD. Because what we're gonna do is we're gonna create 2 new fractions. So we got eighths, and then we're gonna have some more eighths. So we got eighths right here, right? So our LCD is 8. So on both of these fractions, we're gonna have a denominator of 8. In both of them fractions, we're gonna have a denominator of 8, right? Now the question is, but what's our numerators gonna be though? Let me give you a rule. Let me give you a little trick to remember. If your denominator don't change, your numerator don't change. Again, if your denominator don't change, you see how it was an 8, now it's still an 8. First fraction, it was an 8. First fraction is still an 8. So the numerator don't change. It was a 5, it's still a 5. Boom. It was a 5, it's still a 5. It was a 5, it's still a 5. All right? Now, for the second fraction though, it was a quarter or 1/4. Now we got a fraction with an 8 for a denominator. So now you gotta ask yourself, by using multiplication, how do we change a 4 into an 8? By using multiplication. What do we multiply by 4 to make it into an 8? We multiply by 2. 4 times 2 is 8. So I like to do this. I like to do my little shoulder multiplication right there. 4 times 2, that's how I got 8. But then the question is, what's the numerator gonna be? What's the numerator gonna be? If I multiply the denominator by 2, I gotta be consistent. I gotta also multiply the numerator by 2. 1 times 2, which is gonna give us 2 or 2/8. And also understand that we're dealing with equivalent fractions. So I have some other videos on the channel that deal with equivalent fractions, finding equivalent fractions, understanding what equivalent fractions are, understanding what makes fractions equivalent to each other, right? 1/4 and 2/8 are equivalent. right? Think about it like this. If there's a pizza cut into 8 slices, and you take 2 of those slices, if there was another pizza that was the same total size or the same total area, and that pizza was cut into 4 slices, and you took only 1 of those slices, it's the same amount of pizza that you took. Think about it. It's the same amount of pizza that you took, because now you're taking a bigger slice, but you're only taking 1 of them. As opposed to set up like this when it's 8 slices, you're taking 2 slices, but they're smaller slices though. So 2 slices from an 8 slice pizza is the same as 1 slice from a 4 slice pizza. That's what makes these fractions equivalent, all right? 1/4 is the same as 2/8, or 1/4 is equal to 2/8. 1/4, 2/8, they the same thing. Now, what we can do is we can do our addition. But let me go back, because this was actually -5/8, so this should still be negative. That's -5/8. Now, what we're doing is we never add denominators, because denominators are like our unit, right? It's kind of like with money. If we're dealing with dollars, we're adding up how many dollars we have. Here, we have eighths. The question is, how many eighths do we have altogether? If we started out with -5 and now we add 2. So really we're saying we're just putting eighths together. So we got -5/8 and we're adding 2/8. So all we really want to do is just like -5 plus 2, because for real, this is what we're doing. -5 plus 2 is equal to what? And that's going to tell me how many eighths I got. That's going to tell me how many eighths I got. -5 plus 2. It's going to tell me how many eighths I got, right? So now I go to my number line. Now, you could just do this mentally, like -5 plus 2. Think about it like this. You owe somebody $5. Plus 2 means you receive $2. You owe somebody $5 already, right? You want to do the right thing. You want to pay them back. Plus 2 means you receive $2 from somewhere else. You take that $2, you don't really pocket it. You don't keep it and go spend it on something you want. You pay that person back. You pay down your debt. So you did owe them $5. Now you just gave them the $2 that you just received. Now you only owe them $3. Because you did owe them $5, but you gave back 2 of those dollars. So now you only owe them $3. -5 plus 2 is -3, because you still owe something. So it's negative. It's still negative. Your answer is still negative. Now it's just -3. All right. So that's going to be your answer. Right? But let's take a look. So really it's -3. So really it's going to be -3/8. That's how many eighths? -3/8. But let's look at it on the number line, just dealing with the numerators on the number line. Remember, the first number is where we start at. So we start at -5. So imagine -5 is like right here on that number line. And then there's a plus sign. Plus sign means we're moving to the right. The second number tells us how many spaces we're moving. So we're going 1, 2. So that would be -4 next to it, and then -3 next to that. That's where we stop at. So that's how you visually can see that -5 plus 2 is equal to -3. So that's how many eighths we dealing with. -3/8. That's what we got. So that's our answer. So that's how we add and subtract fractions when we're dealing with negatives and positives, right? But it's a few things we got to know how to do. We got to know how to find an LCD, which is a least common denominator. And all that is just, that comes from understanding what an LCM is. An LCM is a least common multiple, right? We got to understand still how to add and subtract positive and negative numbers, right? We got to understand how to find equivalent fractions so that we can do our addition and subtraction. Like we had to do here, we had to know, okay, well, 1/4 turns into 2/8. 1/4 turns into 2/8, right? The -5/8 didn't change. It stays -5/8. It's still gonna be -5/8, right? And then we just have to know how to add and subtract a negative and a positive. How to add a positive number to a negative number. We can do it mentally, or we can also visualize it using our number line. I'm a big fan of the number line. Like, real talk. Like, even when I still do this, like, I learned using how to add and subtract positive and negatives using a number line, like, over 30 years ago, and I still do it to this day. I visualize inside my head like a number line. And if I'm adding, I slide to the right. If I'm subtracting, I slide to the left. I still do it. Like it just works for me. You know, it might work for you, it might not work as good for you, but it's one of the tools that you should have in your arsenal. All right. Whenever you're doing arithmetic, addition, and subtraction, at least with positive and negative numbers. You know what I'm saying? All right. So if any of this confused you, you know, pause the video, you know, rewind the video, go back, look at it again. All right. And until next time, go get you some practice. Peace.